They had the look, the hits, and the ego to match. But Ratt's real legacy isn't just about platinum records and MTV domination. It's a full-throttle dive into how fame, drugs, and unchecked dung from deep within the loins of a bull turned one of glam metal's sharpest bands into a courtroom punchline with more cease and desists than charting singles. So here's how the Rat's Nest started unraveling, way before Aquanet and Spandex took over Sunset Strip. This wasn't some overnight boom. It was a long-ass game of musical chairs, leather pants, and cheap-ass demo tapes. Stephen Pearcy had been kicking around Hollywood since 1973, dragging amps through dive bars with a band called Fire Dome. It lasted about as long as a cheap buzz. By 74, Fire Dome was toast. Pearcy kept moving with a new outfit called Crystal Pistol, which might have sounded edgy on paper, but it aged like milk. And by 76, he swapped out the goofy glam name for something sleazier. Mickey Ratt. Picture Mickey Mouse, but strung out and puking behind Whiskey A Go-Go. It was cartoon filth, pure Sunset Strip energy, even if the band hadn't quite caught fire yet. And by 77, the Mickey got the boot, and now they were just Ratt. Probably a good idea since Disney execs would be screaming and crying copyright all over the place. But still, it was more concept than consistent band. Stephen Pearcy was the only thing sticking around. The lineup spun faster than a record on meth. Shaky Lee passed through on guitar, back when he was just another SoCal shredder looking for the next big thing. Chris Hager and Bob DeLellis filled the gaps. They had other players, Matt Thor, Tim Garcia, Dave Jellison, John Turner on the drums. Bob Eisenberg gave it their best shot before fading into the blur. Mickey Ratt left behind more cassette hits than hit records, demo tapes, bootleg-style live recordings, and their own 80s single, Dr. Rock, Drivin' on E, which they practically threw at people in parking lots. You had to hustle back then, and Pearcy was the kind of guy who'd print flyers himself and then staple them to your forehead if it meant getting a body through the door. Robin Crosby was circling the same scene, bouncing between names like Metropolis, Excalibur, Phenomenon, Secret Service. He looked like a Viking linebacker and played like he was swinging a battle axe. Stephen Pearcy was bound to cross paths with him eventually. And in '82, Jakey Lee tossed them out a name, Warren DeMartini, who was just 18, stuck in college down in San Diego, probably still figuring out his meal plan. But once he plugged in, it was obvious that he had what it took. He dropped out faster than you can say guitar solo and joined the Rat Circus. And for a hot minute, Mark Torian, the future Bullet Boys frontman, actually replaced Warren, but DeMartini came crawling back before Ratt got serious with their first EP. Now, that proto-Ratt lineup was a Frankenstein monster of the Strip scene. Gene Hunter on bass from Jakey Lee's old band Teaser, Kurt Mayer on drums, who laid down the beat for Tell the World, which was Ratt's contribution to Metal Massacre, the same compilation that actually launched Metallica into the pit. But even that didn't last. Eventually, the final puzzle pieces snapped in. Bobby Blotzer, or Blotz as many called him, fresh off a stint with the Vic Vergiet Band, and Juan Crucier, who bailed on Dawkins after nearly a decade in the trenches. And that's when Ratt stopped being an idea and started being a threat. And by '83, Ratt was still technically a club band, but they were starting to smell like money. They inked a deal with Time Coast Music, which was run by Marshall Burl, Milton Berle's nephew, which is probably about the most freakishly Hollywood thing imaginable. But the Burl family tree had gone from vaudeville to hair metal without skipping a beat. And that same year, Ratt dropped their self-titled EP, pressing it independently like they were still working out of a trunk in the back of a Geo Metro. Didn't matter. It moved over 100,000 copies, off the radar, off the grid, all over LA. You Think You're Tough started getting spins on KLOS and KMET, which were basically the twin towers of the LA rock radio at the time. And that was the gateway drug. If you were local and listening, you were already halfway rat bitten. The cover of that EP? Rats crawling all over Tawny Katan's legs. This was before she was doing the whole lean seductively on a car thing, where Whitesnake made her a video legend. But she was dating Robin Crosby back then, and like everybody else around this band, it blurred the line between backstage and bedroom. And Atlantic Records, they took the bait. In March of '84, they came out swinging with Out of the Cellar, another tawny-graced cover, and she was like crawling out of the cellar. But it wasn't just a debut, it was a detonation. Round and Round cracked the Billboard Top 20, basically lived on MTV. And would you know it, but that video had Milton Berle hamming it up a drag, because why the hell not? You got a cross-dressing comedy legend, killer chorus, Tawny Katan, a band that looked like a pack of coke-snorting alley rats, and America couldn't look away. And the thing is, it wasn't just Round and Round. Out of the Cellar was loaded. Wanted Man, Back for More, Lack of Communication. These weren't B-sides, they were borderline hits themselves. The album eventually went triple platinum in the US, selling over 3 million copies and giving Ratt the green light to take things global. Stadiums, festivals, you name it. They weren't just another Sunset Strip band anymore. They were on the damn marquee. Years later, Round and Round even re-entered the digital rock sales chart in 2020, hitting number 18 out of nowhere, like a zombie bite from the 80s. VH1 couldn't help themselves, ranking at 61 on the greatest hard rock songs list because the chorus still friggin' slaps. But this was Ratt's moment. The sleaze was polished just enough for prime time, and for a couple years they weren't just chasing trends. They basically were the trend. By mid-85, Ratt had already gone from gutter rats to arena kings, and they weren't about to tone it down. They dropped Invasion of Your Privacy that July, and if the title didn't clue you in, this was still the same band that treated subtlety like a disease. The album charted number 7 on the Billboard, same as Out of the Cellar, which basically meant their fans weren't just sticking around, they were multiplying. Lay It Down became the big single. Sleazy, slinky, exactly the kind of song that made you feel like you might need to shower after watching the video. And the video, by the way, starred Playboy playmate Marianne Gravatt, who also graced the album cover like the patron saint of an 80s hormonal chaos. It climbed number 40 in the Hot 100, which for a band this loud was a damn miracle. You're in Love followed it up, cracked number 89, which isn't impressive unless you consider the fact that the song was about as romantic as a strip club dumpster. But that was the Ratt formula. DeMartini and Crosby trading solos like Knives in a Back Alley, Piercy howling about lust like it was a medical condition, and a rhythm section that made it all feel like it was about to fall apart in the best way possible. The album sold over 2 million copies, double platinum, and that was just in the US. They hit Japan like Glampocalypse missionaries, and then bounced through 112 shows across the US, steamrolling everything in sight. Even England got a dose when they played Donington's Monsters of Rock, proving that Ratt could hold their own on stages packed with denim, leather, and zero patience for posers. And then came Ratt, the video. VHS Gold, literally. It was the first music home video that ever got a gold certification, and it eventually went platinum because apparently people couldn't get enough of watching a band that looked like a porn shoot and sounded like a car crash in Drop D. It was pure 80s excess with enough eyeliner and crotch shots to make your VCR sweat. And Ratt was not cooling off. They were just getting deeper into the sleaze. By 86, the hairspray fog was starting to settle, and Ratt wasn't interested in playing it safe. Dancing Undercover dropped on August 9th, and right out of the gate, it told you to wipe that glam off your face and brace for impact. This wasn't the same band that strutted through Round and Round, all made up. This was a leaner, meaner, and more pissed off, like they'd swapped eyeliner for brass knuckles. The sound was harder, grittier, less polished, more primal. The melodies took a backseat to riffs that barked and snarled. Critics took one listen and cried foul. Where are the hooks? Where was the gloss? But fans didn't give a damn. They still showed up, fists in the air, wallets in hand, and Dancing Undercover kept Ratt's platinum streak alive. The singles were loaded with attitude. Dance was definitely a hard rock number, strutting with a bit of a sneer to it. Slip of the Lip was pure strip club poetry all the way. Really nice solid swing and groove. Then there was Body Talk, a straight-up ripper that came out swinging like Ratt had just snorted a Megadeth record or something. It was their fastest, most metallic song yet, and it found second life on the soundtrack to The Golden Child, Eddie Murphy's weird-ass mystical action comedy. Nothing about that pairing ever really made sense, but somehow it worked. But in an era drowning in cheesy power ballads, Ratt took a hard pass. Dancing Undercover didn't have a single slow jam. No lighters, no soft fade-outs, no desperate grabs for MTV sap points. It was a wet smack on the forehead to the trend, and maybe a silent nod to the rising tide of thrash that was starting to creep in from the underground more and more. Even the album cover was a mood shift. Gone were the soft-focused bombshells draped in leather and lace. Instead, you got these stark mugshots of the band looking like they just crawled out of a street fight. It was the "we are serious now" moment, whether you bought it or not. And for a second there, it looked like Ratt might go full metal and try to chase Anthrax or Slayer down the alley. But that door slammed shut just as quick as it opened. Dancing Undercover was their brief experiment with grit over glam, and while it worked commercially, the band would soon veer into a more bluesy, traditional hard rock direction. This was Ratt at their most feral, but not for long. In 87, Ratt didn't slow down. They floored it straight into the chaos. They strapped in with Poison for a US tour that turned into one of the top grossing live acts of the year. You had two bands at the peak of sleaze, one eyeliner tube away from a nuclear explosion, dragging circus-level craziness from city to city. It wasn't just rock and roll, it was a traveling hair metal demolition derby, and the fans couldn't throw their bras fast enough. Then they hopped the pond for Europe, jumping on the Monsters of Rock tour, basically the Metal Olympics. And now they're sharing the stages with the kind of bands that could shake Earth's crust loose. And at that point, Ratt was no longer the Sunset Strip's dirtiest secret. They were fully embedded in the global hard rock elite. But behind the scenes, the machine was starting to cough up oil. The cracks weren't subtle anymore. Everyone looked like they were still having fun on stage, but backstage it was more like an episode of Cops. Booze, blow, burnout, the constant touring, pressure to keep topping themselves, the nonstop sleaze parade. It was all starting to show in their faces, their playing, and most importantly, their patience. Ratt was still packing arenas, but the seams were fraying and the party was starting to turn. By late '88, Ratt was still rolling, but the wheels were starting to wobble. Reach for the Sky landed in November with a shiny-ass platinum debut and a number 17 slot in the Billboard charts. It looked like another win. On paper, it was another win. Over 1 million records sold, MTV rotation, packed tours. But under the hood, the engine was misfiring. The critics were sharpening their knives. They didn't just shrug, they sneered. The record caught heat for being overproduced, bloated, too glossy for its own good. That edge and urgency that made Dancing Undercover a nasty little street brawler felt dulled down here. And the band could feel it too. They had been working with Beau Hill, who's producing for years, but after this one they had enough. Too much polish, not enough punch, so Hill was out. Still there were moments. Way Cool Jr. stood out like a cigarette burn on a silk sheet. Bluesy, strangely catchy. MTV definitely couldn't get enough of it. I Want a Woman also made the rounds, even if it felt a little bit more like a checklist item than an anthem. And the tour rolled on through '89, and it was peak hair metal buffet. Ratt headlining with Great White, Warrant, Kix, and Britney Fox opening the gates. Every band had big hair, bigger hooks, and an even bigger coke bill. Fans didn't care if the new record lacked bite, they just wanted the show, and Ratt still delivered. Then there was the album cover. A statue in night vision goggles. World War II fighter plane. A wicker chair. Some twine. A severed hand just chilling in the corner. Looked like Salvador Dali got drunk on Jaeger and started designing band posters. No one in Ratt ever explained what the hell it meant. Piercy allegedly pushed for a version that included exposed statue breasts, because of course he did. But the rest of the band shot it down, afraid Walmart would bury it behind the gospel cassettes. And they were probably right. All the while, the internal pressure was cooking like a sealed microwave burrito. Creative differences, egos flaring. The vibe was shifting and not in a good way. Reach for the Sky would be the last time Ratt touched platinum, and everyone could feel the change coming. The glam was fading, the frustration bubbling, and their next move would totally split fans, piss off critics, and mark the moment where the golden era slammed into the ditch. By 1990, the sun was setting fast on Sunset Strip, but Ratt wasn't done squeezing out hits. Detonator dropped in August, like a last-ditch flare, and the band had finally cut ties with Beau Hill after Reach for the Sky, hoping to spark something fresh. Enter Sir Arthur Payson, a Desmond Child protege. And if Desmond Child name rings bells, it's because he was the guy behind half the hits on rock radio at the time. Bon Jovi, Aerosmith, Kiss. You wanted polished? Desmond had a can of industrial-grade pop sheen ready to pour all over your whole damn record. Child co-wrote most of the album, and it showed. Detonator sounded like it had been soaked in lip gloss. The sleaze was still there, but it had been dry cleaned, deodorized, handed back with a receipt. And the grit of Dancing Undercover, totally gone. This was corporate glam all the way. Power chords and a three-piece suit. Loving you's a dirty job. Tried to carry the swagger and made it onto MTV. It had the hooks, the sarcastic wink, but it really never truly got its due. Giving Yourself Away was their swing at an emotional power ballad, full of vulnerable lyrics and big chorus energy. The kind of song you knew was built for prom slow dances and soft focused music videos. And then there was Heads I Win, Tails You Lose, which featured none other than the great John Bon Jovi on background vocals, because nothing says 80s safety net like a John Bon Jovi cameo. Critics were split. Some gave Ratt credit for evolving, growing up, aiming for bigger, more melodic choruses. Others accused them of neutering their sound, ditching that streetwise venom that made Out of the Cellar a benchmark. Either way, it didn't sell like it used to. Sure, Detonator moved units, but it didn't hit platinum. And in the world of hair metal, that was a neon warning light flashing, dude, you are frigging fading. And while the music was getting cleaner, the band was falling apart. Robin Crosby, once the towering, Viking-sized presence on the guitar, was in a total freefall. The Big H had him by the throat. During the Japan leg of the Detonator tour in early '91, his playing started slipping from sloppy to tragic. At one show, the band opened in alternate tuning. Crosby apparently forgot to swap guitars and ended up playing 2 songs completely out of tune. And of course, it would be out of tune because you're not in the alternate tuning. It wasn't just embarrassing, it was painful. Osaka would be his last show with Ratt. After the tour wrapped, he finally checked into rehab. The band brought in Michael Schenker, the legendary shredder from the Scorpions and UFO, as a fill-in. On paper, it looked like an upgrade, but chemistry doesn't live on paper. It wasn't the same band anymore. The danger was gone. The spark was fading. Ratt had polished their sound, cleaned up the rough edges, and somewhere along the way lost the fangs. By '92, the hairspray had dried up and the party was over. Stephen Pearcy, the greasy, sneering face of Ratt, finally called it. February rolls around and he just walks. Totally done. After nearly 2 decades of grinding through all this mountain of backstage drama and just insanity, Pearcy bailed and started a new band called Arcade. It was the kind of move that screamed fresh start, but really meant let's try this again without all the baggage. And Arcade gave him a clean slate, but Pearcy wouldn't want to sit still. By '95, he jumped into Vicious Delight, a band that sounded like a rejected Cologne, and then he swerved into industrial territory, trying to get a little bit of his Trent Reznor on with Vertex in '96. Unfortunately, it was like watching a guy try on different identities at a Halloween store, all while the glam metal house he helped build slowly sank into the mud. And Robin Crosby wasn't going quietly either. Despite being gutted by heroin and already sidelined from Ratt, he still tried to keep music in his veins. He started up a band called Secret Service with bassist Chris Barato from Juice 13 and the Oddfathers. Not exactly a Billboard dream team, but it was something. Crosby also laid down guitar on Rumble Dog's self-titled album in '93, another one of those deep-cut projects that only the most stubborn fans ever found in a record store clearance bin. But by the mid-'90s, it was officially dead. Ratt was done. No lineup, no new music, no plans, just dust and memories. The glam scene had been bulldozed by flannel and self-loathing. Cobain showed up, mumbled through a distortion pedal, and every hairspray band just got pushed out the window. And from '92 to '96, it was total radio silence. Just a bit of rehab therapy here and there, side gigs, cold shoulder from record execs who once begged for their demos. Labels that used to shell out 6-figure advances were now totally ghosting every glam band. Ratt wasn't just off the charts, they were now off the map. And yet, their old records kept moving. People still spun Out of the Cellar, still cranked Round and Round like it was the national anthem of regrettable decisions. Rock radio never fully let go. And in the shadows, the glam nostalgia started bubbling. Quiet at first, but definitely undeniable. And even with the band on ice, the story wasn't over. Not by a mile. By '96, the hangover had worn off just enough for the core of Ratt to start squinting at each other from across the smoldering wreckage. Pearcy, DeMartini, Blotzer, all 3 survivors of the Sunset Strip apocalypse, decided to give it another go. And it wasn't some big press conference moment. It was more like, hey, we're all still alive. Want to try not sucking too badly together again? And they brought in Robbie Crane, who'd done time in Vince Neil's solo band, to handle bass. By '97, Ratt was back on the road as a 4-piece. Pearcy occasionally strapping on a guitar like the old Mickey Ratt days, even if his 6-string playing was more visual than functional. And then came Collage, dropped in July '97. It wasn't a real album in the traditional sense, just a hodgepodge of leftovers. Half old Mickey Ratt cuts, half B-sides, some redone tracks, all held together with duct tape and tequila. Certainly was not Out of the Cellar, but it scratched the itch for diehards. It said, hey, remember when this was fun? Even if the glue smelled like 1983. But the big move came in '98. Ratt inked a global deal with Sony, and it hit the studio again. And this wasn't a nostalgia act anymore, at least not in their minds. They're aiming for more of a full-scale return. So in July of '99, they dropped the self-titled Ratt, like they're reintroducing themselves to a world that had moved on. The sound ditched all the glitter and lace, going for that more gritty, blues-based approach. It was stripped-down hard rock. Still Ratt, but older, a bit gruffer. Less interested in eyeliner and more interested in whiskey. And the single, Over the Edge, crept into the mainstream rock top 40, but just barely. Critics gave it a golf clap at best. Commercially, it did not move the needle. Fans were glad the band was back, but something felt off. Chemistry just wasn't there. The edge had dulled. The danger was gone. It was like seeing an old party buddy at a grocery store buying kale. Later that year, they brought Kerry Kelly as a second guitar player, hoping to tighten things up and maybe spark a new chapter. but whatever flame they were trying to fan just wouldn't catch. The vibe was more reunion tour than rebirth, and everyone could feel it, even if nobody wanted to say it out loud. So by 2000, Ratt had officially turned into a soap opera with guitars. Stephen Pearcy bailed again, this time right before a scheduled tour. Classic Pearcy move. Rage quit with a cigarette in one hand and middle finger in the other. He jumped into a new band called Nitronic, which rebranded almost instantly as Ratt featuring Stephen Pearcy. Subtle. That stunt lit a fire under the rest of the band, especially DeMartini and Bobby Blotzer, who were now stuck holding the bag and trying to explain to venues why their lead singer had Houdini'd out of the lineup. So now you had two versions of Ratt floating around. The Pearcy version, basically him playing old songs under a bootleg banner, and the official Ratt run by DeMartini and Blotzer, with Jizzy Pearl from Love Hate handling the vocals and Kerry Kelly on guitar. So yeah, the band basically split in a dueling hair metal time machine. Pearcy's side had the voice, DeMartini's side had the riffs, and the fans had to squint at flyers to figure out which version they were buying tickets for. It was a mess. Two rat holes, same cheese. Meanwhile, Robin Crosby was fading fast. In 2001, he went public with his HIV positive status, which he likely contracted during his long, brutal dance with heroin. The guy who once towered on stage with a BC Rich slung low and that Viking grin was now fighting to survive. The infection, the addiction, it had all caught up. Robin passed away on June 6, 2002, of a heroin overdose, age 42. He never got that redemption arc, never got to be part of the comeback. Just a slow, sad spiral that ended the way it always seems to in this business. But Crosby wasn't forgotten. Even as the band splintered and reformed and splintered again, everybody agreed on one thing. Robin Crosby was the heart and soul of the early Ratt. The big dude with the riffs, the warmth, the attitude. And when he went down, a piece of Ratt went with him. And it never really came back. So by 2006, Behind the Music had become the rock and roll version of a confessional booth. And when VH1 finally rolled out Ratt's episode on May 11th, it hit like a punch to the gut and a real jolt to the fan base. It aired the whole dirty saga. The glory, the women, the excess, the come down. Robin Crosby's heartbreaking fall from arena god to lost soul. It wasn't pretty, but it was honest. And it reminded everybody just how high this band had climbed before it all came crashing down. And suddenly people cared again. Old fans started dusting off their denim, and reunion rumors were swirling faster than a rumor mill on Sunset Strip. And then right on cue in December, Metal Sludge dropped the bomb. Stephen Pearcy and Juan Crucier were reporting talking reunion terms with Blotzer and DeMartini. Within days, Jizzy Pearl confirmed he was out. Ratt was going old school again. Well, kind of. Juan ultimately passed on the offer, and so Robbie Crane stayed put on the bass. But Pearcy was back in the fold, and that was the headline. The voice of Ratt, Sleaze incarnate, was once again behind the mic. And just like that, the wheels turned fast. Ratt announced a summer 2007 co-headlining tour with Poison and Great White. Their first time sharing a bill with Poison since '99, and this time it wasn't a nostalgia act. It was a full-on glam metal revival, hitting amphitheaters, country fairs, greasy-ass rock festivals from June 13th to August 19th. It wasn't exactly 84 anymore, but you wouldn't know it from the sea of hairspray and tank tops in the crowd. And then in 2008, more shuffling. John Corabi, the ex-Motley Crue frontman turned rhythm guitar player for Ratt, quietly dipped. His replacement, Carlos Cavazo, the Quiet Riot axe slinger who helped bring Come On Feel the Noise to every strip club in America. Cavazo played his first gig with the band on August 27, 2008 in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, because of course it was Baton Rouge. That town's built for screaming guitar solos and beer-stained denim. So now the lineup was Pearcy, DeMartini, Blotzer, Crane, and Cavazo. Old blood, new fire. And this crew wasn't just here to tour. They were about to head in the studio, loaded up, ready to take one last swing. And the comeback wasn't just talk anymore. Ratt was sharpening its teeth. In 2009, it looked like the Rats were done chewing through each other long enough to actually make a record. They signed a global deal with Loud and Proud and Roadrunner, led by industry vet Tom Lipsky, who clearly had the patience of a saint or a death wish. The result? Infestation, their first studio album in over a decade, and it hit shelves in April 2010. And it didn't suck. It debuted at number 30 on the Billboard 200, which was a legacy glam band in a post-iTunes pre-streaming apocalypse was basically a miracle. The lead single, Best of Me, got legit airplay and came with shiny new video. Fans were shocked. Critics were stunned. Pearcy himself said that it was designed to sound like it belonged between Out of the Cellar and Invasion of Your Privacy. And for once, he was not fibbing. It was tight, riffy, loud. nasty in all the right places. And Warren DeMartini, he was loving it too, especially the guitar interplay. He really dug playing with Carlos Cavazo. He talked about how they both resurrected the old double lead approach he used to do with Robin. And that twin guitar attack was part of what made early Ratt pop like a firecracker. And they brought it back. Tour went global. US, Europe, Japan, the whole nine. And then bam, October 26, 2010, just 6 months after Infestation dropped, they pulled the plug. Indefinite hiatus. Internal tensions. That's the usual script. It's like watching a guy win the lottery and then set his pants on fire out of habit. They just released the best album in 2 decades, and instead of building momentum, they tripped over their own egos and face-planted. Again. And by 2012, the pendulum swung back again. Pearcy announced that Ratt was writing new stuff. Robbie Crane left in March, and Juan Crucier finally got off the sidelines, playing his first show with Ratt in over 20 years at the M3 Festival. For a hot second, it felt like maybe the engine was starting to turn over. But by April 24th, Stephen Pearcy peaced out for the 3rd time. And this one came with a laundry list of grievances, constant turmoil, unresolved business, public threats, fans getting dicked around. It was like the breakup equivalent of flipping every table on your way out of the restaurant. He had had it. And the band had become a loop of the same fight in different years, like Groundhog Day. They were the kings of the Sunset Strip and the emperors of self-sabotage. Every time they got it together, somebody lit a match. By 2015, Ratt wasn't so much a band anymore, as it was a courtroom brawl in leather pants. And the guy who kicked the whole thing into nuclear meltdown? Blotz. Bobby Blotzer. Ratt's drummer and apparently future aspiring dictator. In June, Blotz launched his own off-brand knockoff, Bobby Blotzer's Ratt Experience, which sounded like a bad cover band playing county fairs, but he had bigger plans. By August, he ditched the pretense and just called it Ratt. Same name, new lineup, none of the original firepower. It was like rebooting The Godfather, but with sock puppets. Juan Crucier, meanwhile, was doing his own thing, playing deep cuts, rarities, flying solo under his own name. Not using the Ratt moniker, just trying to give fans a taste of the stuff that never made it to radio. But Bobby Blotzer saw red, anyway, and then he sued Juan almost instantly for trademark infringement. And that's when the legal diarrhea really started to flow. It's back in 97, Pearcy, Blotzer, and DeMartini formed a little business entity called WBS, Inc. WBS, to handle the band's affairs, like royalties, trademarks, whatever Taco Bell receipts counted as touring expenses. Fast forward to 2015, and Blotzer allegedly pulled a corporate coup, taking over WBS behind DeMartini's back. Suddenly, Bobby was strutting around claiming he owned the Ratt name outright, because technically WBS held the trademark, and guess who now controlled it? Now DeMartini, he friggin' lost it. He fired back with a lawsuit in October, calling Blotzer's version a glorified tribute band and accusing him of false advertising. The gloves are off, the eyeliner was smeared, and Ratt was now officially more of a courtroom drama than a band. And then, in November 2015, the first gavel dropped. The court actually sided with Bobby Blotzer, at least temporarily. That ruling gave him the legal okay to keep touring under the Ratt name, even if the rest of the classic lineup wanted nothing to do with it. The guy who once held down the back seat was now fronting a band with no original frontman, no DeMartini, no Juan Crucier, just Bobby and a bunch of hired guns peddling the Ratt brand like it was a used Camaro with a cracked head gasket. The only thing louder than the guitars at this point was illegal crap echoing through the scene. Fans were confused. The band was in pieces, and the name Ratt had officially become a brand up for grabs. Rock and roll never dies, just ends up in court. So by 2016, the band called Ratt had become the rock and roll equivalent of a fake Rolex sold out of somebody's trench coat. Bobby Blotzer dragged his Franken band out on what he boldly titled the American-Made Re-Invasion Tour, a name so bloated with irony it should have come with a warning label. It was Ratt in name only. None of the original voices, none of the signature riffs, just Blotz with a lineup of musical mercenaries just gagging and slogging their way through the hits. So he takes this thing all across North America, even hitting the UK with stops like Hard Rock Hell in London, all while waving the Ratt flag like he still owned the damn fort. Behind the scenes, though, Blotzer was still swinging lawsuits. He was suing Juan and Stephen Pearcy at the same time he was on stage pretending they didn't exist, accusing them of infringing on a name that, as it turned out, had no real legal right in the first place. And on November 26th, karma hit like a cinder block. The U.S. District Court dropped a bombshell. Summary judgment in favor of Juan Crucier. The ruling was crystal clear. The Ratt trademark had never been properly transferred to WBS. which meant WBS didn't own a frickin' thing. And that magic piece of paper that Blotz had been waving around to claim ownership, absolutely worthless. Trademark rights bounced back to the original 1985 Ratt partnership. Stephen Pearcy, Warren DeMartini, Juan Crucier, and yes, even Blotz. 4 names, not one. And in plain English, Bobby Blotzer had been squatting. All those press releases, all those flyers, all that huffing and puffing about his version of Ratt blown to hell. He'd overstepped, and now the legal footing had shifted under him like a stage collapsing mid-solo. But did Bobby Blotzer back down? Hell no. He kept touring anyway, still slapping Ratt on the marquee, claiming the judgment wasn't final. It was like watching a guy get evicted and still show up every day to water the plants. And meanwhile, the real band, Pearcy, DeMartini, Crucier, finally moved to shut it all down. On November 29, 2016, they booted Bobby Blotzer from the Ratt partnership entirely. The trio regrouped and announced the Back for More tour, and this time with the actual legal claim to the name. They were battered, battle-worn, dragging more lawsuits behind them than guitars, but at least they had the power now. The Ratt name was back in the hands of the guys who made it matter. But Blotz, he wasn't going quietly. He doubled down, refused to step aside, and kept pretending nothing had changed. It was a mess, a total circus, a war of attrition. And the only real winner was the crowd that still showed up, hoping somebody would play round and round without suing each other mid-chorus. And by 2017, Bobby Blotzer's Ratt circus had veered from sad to delusional, and the courts were about to slam the cage shut for good. In June, final judgment came down. Juan Crucier officially won. No more wiggle room, no more creative flyer layouts, or Blotz squinting into a camera saying, "It's my band." The judge dropped the gavel, and WBS, Blotzer's legal meat shield, was toast. Desperate, WBS fired off an appeal to the Ninth Circuit, but it was like trying to duct tape a sinking yacht. And meanwhile, Pearcy, DeMartini, and Crucier weren't content to just savor the win. They totally went for the jugular. In May of 2018, the Ratt partnership sued Bobby Blotzer and WBS for trademark infringement, pointing out the obvious. Bobby had been illegally touring as Ratt after the courts already told him to knock it the hell off back in early 2016. And they wanted blood, financially and legally. And by March 2019, the Ninth Circuit upheld the whole damn ruling. No reversals, no mercy. Blotzer's band was now officially dead in the water. The Ratt name, after years of being dragged through cover band hell and legal quicksand, was now legally and permanently restored to its rightful owners. And Blotz, he was out. Not kind of out. Not taking a break, just plain out. Booted from his own band's legacy, like a drummer who missed too many cues, which frankly wasn't far from the truth. So what they have by 2018? 2 straight years of full-on identity theft. A doppelganger band confusing fans coast to coast. Venues booking Ratt and getting a lineup that looked like it wandered off from a cover band contest at Chili's. Lawsuits stacking up like parking tickets. Finally, a legal ruling that put the name back where it belonged, in the hands of the guys who actually built the thing in the first place. It was a long, embarrassing saga, but at least by the end of it, fans could buy a damn concert ticket without needing a lawyer to read the fine print. By 2018, after years of legal whack-a-mole, backstage mutinies, and enough lawsuits to fill a Kiss box set, the Ratt brand was finally stripped down to its last 2 OG survivors, Stephen Pearcy and Juan Crucier. Everyone else had either quit, been fired, or had the good sense to walk away from the circus. Warren DeMartini? Gone. Carlos Cavazo? Out. Jimmy DeGrasso? Picked up and moved on. So Pearcy and Juan did what aging rockers do best. They held the flag and rebuilt. On July 5th, 2018, they unveiled a fresh lineup, unofficially dubbed The New Breed, though it still toured under the real deal Ratt name. Yet another Frankenstein version of the band. Pearcy on vocals, Crucier on bass, Jordan Ziff shredding lead, Chris Sanders handling rhythm guitar, and Pete Holmes from Black and Blue pounding the drums. No big fanfare or billboard blitz, just 5 guys with a legacy to defend and a booking agent on speed dial. But let's be honest, this wasn't your older brother's Ratt. The new blood had chops, but for fans who grew up with Robin and Warren trading solos, Pearcy looking like a sleazy glam lizard in a leather vest, it was a jarring shift. The crowd was mostly diehards and nostalgia junkies looking to relive the Out of the Cellar days, even if Out of the Cellar was more Holiday Inn ballroom at this point. And then came 2020. Chris Sanders quietly tapped out in February. No meltdowns or public drama. He just pieced out and retired from music like somebody clocking out from a job he never liked in the first place. And then Pearcy barely had time to process before the pandemic hit like a wrecking ball. The band had announced the big rock summer tour with Cinderella's Tom Kiefer, Skid Row, Slaughter, monster of a throwback package, but by June, the tour was a smoking crater. Vaporized. Pandemic rules. No packed clubs, no spandex, no fun. Pearcy kept teasing new music during lockdown like a kid shaking an empty Christmas present, but nothing ever landed. Just vague promises and a handful of solo appearances, while Ratt was a brand and they were just kind of hovering there. And then came another lineup change because, of course, in June 2021, Frankie Lindia stepped in to replace Sanders. Frankie was best known for playing with David Lee Roth and absolutely nailing Eddie Van Halen's licks in the tribute band The Atomic Punks. The dude can play. If you squint, get a bit plotzed, he might even give you a flicker of Warren's old magic. But by now, the band was more of a legacy operation than a creative force. Steven and Juan were the last wires, keeping it plugged in the past. The name still held weight, the shirts still sold, Round and Round still played, but the glory days, long gone. The new breed was holding on, but barely. And every year it felt a little more like Ratt was slowly becoming its own tribute band. And by 2022, Stephen Pearcy finally said the quiet part out loud. In a rare moment of honesty, he admitted what fans had suspected for years. Dragging Ratt's name around with only one other original member was starting to feel like Weekend at Bernie's with a tour bus. He called the band a dead zone. No communication. No real movement. Just a logo, some legal paperwork, and a past nobody can agree on. And he didn't sugarcoat it. If Ratt was ever going to do something real again, it'd have to be with the original guys. But he shut that dream down too. It's not going to happen. So he pivoted. Pearcy went full solo, playing the Ratt hits with his own band, belting out Lay It Down and lack of communication to crowds who didn't care if the rest of the band was original. They just wanted to feel 18 again for a night. Juan Crucier, meanwhile, peeled off and did his own thing too. By March 2024, he was touring under the hilariously self-aware banner Juan Crucier, the other voice of Ratt. Definitely some tongue-in-cheek genius, leaning into the fact that, yeah, he sang backup and the occasional lead, and damn it, he's going to milk this thing now too. And if there's any hope that Ratt as a band was coming back, that pretty much killed it. That was the final phase. Every member doing their own tribute to themselves. And then out of nowhere, January 2025 dropped a weird twist. Stephen Pearcy, Warren DeMartini announced a reunion, for real this time, but not under the name Ratt. They were headlining the M3 Rock Festival, joined by Carlos Cavazo on guitar, Matt Thor on bass, a name that goes all the way back to the Mickey Ratt days, Blas Elias from Slaughter on guitar, no blots, no Crucier, no lawsuits, no crap. Pearcy was clear, this wasn't about rights, ownership, or pissing matches. It was about the music, not the name, which was probably the most grown-up thing he's ever said. No one had to pretend it was 1985 again. They just had to show up, plug in, give the songs a proper send-off. And for once, it sounded like the goal wasn't to resurrect the band. It was to honor the damn thing before it slipped into total parody. And that legacy, it was never just spandex and hairspray. Ratt carved out their space within that twin lead guitar attack. DeMartini and Crosby trading licks like two knife fighters in a back alley. Their sounds smashed together perfectly. Had more swagger than Aerosmith, glossy flash of Sweet, the gritty crunch of Scorpions and Priest. It was Hollywood sleaze sharpened into something dangerous, glam with teeth. And they were at their peak. Ratt didn't sound like a joke. They sounded like a gang. Songs like Round and Round were just catchy. Total blueprints for an entire era. And every poodle-haired band that followed, they were just running Ratt's playbook with half the riffs. Ratt never stayed together long enough to build a flawless legacy, but the pieces that did work, they definitely left claw mark. To my subscribers, thank you so much. You are awesome. And if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to gnaw the hell out of that subscribe button, then go over to the like button and drag your greasy little tail across it to show some love and join the family. And I want to thank you so much for watching.